Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, may I have 1 minute, please? We do not need to leave. 1 minute, please.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, go ahead. Without objection, I'd like to ask that Mr. Davis and I, during this moment, have a minute each, because I would like to say something that doesn't involve a question and you might want to respond to it. The point I want to make, you raised that very essential question, what do we do if we don't have enough troops there? Well, I think we have to look at the fact that this isn't a short-term war. We've been there 5 years. It looks like we may be there another 10 years. And even General Shinseki said we needed more troops. Well, at some point you have to make a decision in this battlefield, in this war. If we don't have enough troops to do the job, then we should get more troops. But if we're going to go on the cheap to get private contractors, we're not on the cheap at all. It's costing us more money, and I believe it's causing us problems with the Iraqi people. Let's let the military replan this. It seems to me we've had bad decisions from this administration, too much of the time in handling this whole war, planning for it adequately, and staffing it adequately with the U.S. military. They're the ones that ought to be doing this job. Mr. Davis?
Well, Mr. Chairman, I understand, but let me just say, troops are there, are not paid to protect civilians. That's not what military troops are trained for. I went through officer basic course at in Georgia at Fort Benning. I went through basic training at Fort Ord. That's not what troops are trained for when they go out into the battle zone. This is a unique responsibility. It is through the State Department, not the Department of Defense. And as we'll hear from the next panel, our troops are not, at this point, been trained to do this kind of work. This is a different kind of a province. Now, if we want to train them to do that, we can do that, but that hasn't been the history throughout the last 50 years of the military that I'm aware of. So we then have to decide from a cost-benefit perspective. I think this is an important conversation to have. But to date, that's not the contractor's fault. I think our argument would be with the State Department.
I want to yield to Mr. Tierney, but Blackwater and the private military recruit from our military. So these people are trained to do the job that Blackwater and other private military people are asking them to do. So why can't the military do it? I think they could do it if we had enough military personnel.
Sure, I'd like Mr. Prince to respond, but I'm sure they retrain them. They don't just take raw recruits out. Could I just ask him to respond?
Yes, sir. There was an earlier allegation about companies like us raiding the ranks of the special operations community for this kind of work. And the GAO report found that, yes, they are getting out and working for companies like us, but they're not getting out at any higher rate than they ever did before. So they're, instead of becoming a financial analyst or an accountant or some other kind of businessman, they come to work for companies like Blackwater, but they're not getting out at any rate higher than they ever did before. And if I could just correct two slight errors I made, we did not have any fatalities of Blackwater personnel in 2006, and one of the contracts I testified to as being under the GSA schedule was in fact sole source. We'll get you the very detailed information as to which contracts were GSA and which were sole source. I'm not qualified to answer that right now.
We'll receive any documents you
Mr. Chairman, if I just have a minute. But I think that's one of the things we want to get to in this and later hearings is if the mission is going to be 4 or 5 or 6 years, you want to change the mission of the military. But that's not the contractor's fault. Our argument there is with the Defense Department and the State Department.
I strongly encourage the Congress to sponsor true activity-based cost studies. What does it cost the Air Force to move a pound of cargo in a war zone? What does it cost to put a brigade in the field or to train it and to equip it? All these basic functions. Even what is the hourly cost of aircraft doing refueling?
We're going to have you answer some more questions, I'm sure, along those lines. Mr. Tierney, it's your turn to question.
Are you certain, Mr. Chairman?